highest heart love. Welcome to the YouTube live book reading of Cheikh Anta Diop and the New Light on African History by Dr. John Henrik Clarke. I'm your moderator and narrator, Uriel NEVEU Riley. So we pick up at page 12 at the bottom. Welcome all. What's going on, y'all? I was thinking about it's like yesterday's reading went so well as the previous reading. So I hope y'all are enjoying all of this. And if you don't, you can change the channel, right? That's why we do this. This is that corner of YouTube where we read books, write poetry, and learn. All right. So, picking up where we left off at. While using Africa as the vantage point and the basis for his thesis, Dr. Diop does not neglect the broader dimensions of history. He shows that history cannot be restricted by the limits of ethnic group, nation, or culture. Roman history is Greek as well as Roman, and both the Greek and the Roman histories are Egyptian because the entire Mediterranean was civilized by Egypt, and Egypt in turn borrowed from other parts of Africa, especially Ethiopia. Welcome, hi, it's Heart Love. We're on page 13. And so, what he has right here is different countries on the continent of Africa, how they were displayed back in the 1800s. Okay, so you get to see that. See that? Excellent. Peace, everyone. And remember, these weren't sovereign countries back then. It was pure land for the people that conquered it. So that's why he had just said, and Egypt in turn borrowed from other parts of Africa, especially Ethiopia. We know that they looked at the Nile different than we do because of the way the Nile runs, okay? So Upper Egypt would be where we call on the map the southern area, and that's because of the way the Nile runs, okay? So from up at the top of the map, if you will, where they say is now the Middle East, it's actually running toward there from down by Ethiopia. All right. Page 14. Africa came into the Mediterranean world mainly through Greece, which had been under African influence. The first Greek invasion of Africa was peaceful and scholarly. This invasion brought in Herodotus. Egypt had lost its independence over a century before his visit. This was the beginning of the period of foreign domination over Egypt that would last in different forms for 2,000 years. Welcome, thank you. Peace, Peace, everyone. Highest heart love. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Highest heart love. Yes, I have African statues around me and in the backyard, and all of it's genuine. Thank you. Thank you so much. The African origin of civilization, myth, or reality is one volume translation of the major sections of the first and last of the books by Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, i.e., Nations Negre et Culture and Antériorité des Civilisations Negres. These two works have challenged and changed the direction of attitudes about the place of African people in history in scholarly circles around the world. It was largely due to these works that Cheikh Anta Diop, with W.E.B. Du Bois, was honored as the writer who had exerted the greatest influence on African people in the 20th century at the World Festival of Arts held in Dakar, Senegal in 1966. The main thesis of the present work is the redefinition of the place of Egypt in African history, in particular in the world history in general. Dr. Diop calls attention to the historical and archaeological and anthropological evidence that supports his thesis. The civilization of Egypt, he maintains, is African in origin and in early development. In his book, Dr. Diop says the history of Africa will remain suspended in air and cannot be written correctly until African historians connect it with the history of Egypt. He further states the African historian who evades the problem of Egypt is neither modest or objective, nor unruffled. He is ignorant, cowardly, and neurotic. That's right. Dr. Diop approaches the history of Africa frontally, head on, with explanations but no apologies. In locating Egypt on the map of human geography, he asks and answers the questions: who were the Egyptians of the ancient world? The Ethiopians say that the Egyptians were one of their colonies, which was brought into Egypt by the deity Osiris. The Greek writer Herodotus repeatedly referred to the Egyptians as being dark skinned people with woolly hair. They, he says, have the same tint of skin which approaches that of the Ethiopians. The opinion of the ancient writers on the Egyptians is more or less summed up by Gaston Maspero, 1846 through 1916, when he says, by the almost unanimous testimony of the ancient historians, they, the Egyptians, belong to an African race which first settled in Ethiopia on the Middle Nile. Following the course of the river, they gradually reach the sea, which would be the Mediterranean Sea. All right. The Greek writer Herodotus may be mistaken. Cheikh Anta Diop tells us when he reports the customs of a people, but one must grant that he was at least capable of recognizing the skin color of the inhabitants of the countries he visited. His descriptions of the Egyptians were the descriptions of a black people. At this point, the reader needs to be reminded of the fact that at the time of Herodotus's visit to Egypt and other parts of Africa between 480 and 425 5 BCE, Egypt's golden age was over. Egypt had suffered from several invasions, mainly the Kushite invasions coming from within Africa. And starting in 751 BCE, and the Assyrians' invasions from Western Asia called the Middle East, starting in 671 BCE. If Egypt, after years of invasions by other people and nations, was a distinct black African nation at the time of Herodotus, shouldn't we at least assume that it was more so before these invasions occurred? Why, yes, that would make sense. If Egypt is a dilemma in Western historiography, histor- historiography, it is a created dilemma. The Western historians, in most cases, have rested the foundation of what is called Western civilization on the false assumptions or claim that the ancient Egyptians were white people. To do this, they had to ignore great masterpieces on Egyptian history written by other white historians who did not support this point of view, such as Gerald Massey's great classic, Ancient Egypt, The Light of the World, 1907, and his other works, A Book of the Beginnings, and The Natural Genesis. Other neglected works by white writers are Politics, Intercourse, and Trade of the Carthaginians, Ethiopians, and Egyptians by A.H.L. Hearing, 1833, and Ruins of Empires by Count Volney, 1787. Beautiful. And we'll pause right here. Hi, it's Heart Love. Thank you so much, Street Shoes. That's right. Africa is extremely rich, the richest in minerals. And you have to look at it as just be objective, right? Africa sits in the middle of the world. It's a large continent. It's the last place on the planet that the great migration happens between animals still to this day, right? Untouched. There's loads of places. Thank you guys for liking and subscribing. There's loads of places on this world where it hasn't been inhabited in a very long time. You have a place in Antarctica that hasn't rained in over 1,000,000 years, right? That's because of different levels of where they are in the planet, on the planet. So when we're looking at Africa, yeah, and we're looking at the Blue Nile and the White Nile, which run all the way down there in Lake Victoria in the southern part, which was called Upper Egypt. Okay? We just look at the geographic, we still today have species of animals that migrate all together through this part of Africa. This equatorial type of environment would need high levels of melanin, and especially working out there in the heat to be able to be responsive and effective in that environment. You would need high levels of melanin. So it's not a guessing. And that's part of why I'm reading these books, right? So people aren't guessing. That's why I started off and began with civilization or barbarism. Because when we go through this, you see it clear. And like it said at the beginning of this book, this was his magnum opus. So I'll show you some brief things right here. We look at the prehistory, which Dr. John Henrik Clarke was just talking about, right? These are the facts right here of what we know. Anthropology and archaeology, right? You have it way down here starting. This is the beginning. And then at that time, it was only highly melanated people on the planet. See, 14 million years back. And the population of monkeys, 5.5 million, the beginning of humanity, diverse varieties of the Australopithecus, right? And then you have from 130,000 to 35,000 years BCE, humanity is represented only by the Negroid Homo sapiens. See? Did all the work for us, so we're not guessing. We're not guessing at all. Look at this. All right, and that was just in chapter 1 of prehistory, but this was one of the major facts. Thank you guys for the likes and subscribes. This information is very valuable, foundation information. Again, so you're not guessing. See? This right here is the African seen by himself, right? Or the Egyptian seen by himself. B is the Indo-Europeans of the time, right? And this is the other blacks of Africa, which is C. See? And D is the Semite. So you have right here and right here, you see that? A representation of themselves and the other blacks in Africa, and they almost look identical, even the garb. You're not guessing, see? And if we look and read this headline, you see it says, "This painting from the tomb of Ramses III, 1200 BCE, shows that the Egyptians perceived themselves as blacks and represented themselves as such without possible confusion with the Indo-Europeans or the Semites. This is a representation of the races in minute detail, which guarantees the realism of the colors. Throughout their entire history, the Egyptians never dreamed of representing themselves by types B or D. They never even thought about it. See that? They represented themselves like the other blacks of Africa. And if they wanted to paint themselves in the color of a white person or looking white, they would have. They had all the colors to do it, right? The stuff was just literally taken and robbed. So, highest heart love. Thank you for reading with us. We'll come back with Cheikh Anta Diop and the New Light on African History by the great master teacher, Dr. John Henrik Clarke. I'm your moderator and narrator, shaking it up in the world. Highest heart love. Thank you guys for being here. Have a wonderful Monday. Yes, prosperity, love, and honor. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Yes. And it's all genuine, you know. That's how when you're working on this level, you know, the Most High always sends protection, divine guidance and protection. So I love to share that with you guys. I love you all, my family and friends, highest heart love. I love you. Highest heart love. Y'all have a wonderful day. And honor. Peace, peace. All right. I'll talk to y'all soon. I'll see you.